A lot of hives, we changed our method.
Okay.
And I'm not saying for you guys to change it,
Right.
but so we changed to Formic.
Okay.
Okay, because with Formic, I can treat all my hives in a matter of, hours. It's more of my drive time,
Yeah.
and I can go.
Sure.
And we may, I don't know if we'll treat today. We're technically not supposed to treat if it's over 85 degrees with Formic.
Okay.
So, Formic, you just basically pop up between your brood boxes and you lay a pad in and shut it. You're done, and then that cooks for 10 days. And then after 10 days, you put the next pad in, and you're done. If you have formic acid, that's good. If not, you use oxalic acid vapor. And when you use an oxalic acid vapor, you're going to treat, and it's depending on who you talk to. I treat every 5 days,
Okay.
so for at least 4 to 5 cycles, because then I've matched the brood cycle. Because I can't get the mites under the cappings, so I'll treat, wait 5 days, treat 5 days. But what I do is I use the sticky boards.
Okay.
So I treat, and after 3 days I come back and I pull out that sticky board, and if I see mites, I know to keep going. If I don't have mites, I can stop. And then what I do is I've handled, so if I did that series and I'm checking my sticky board every single time, then once you feel good about it, then remember you're not done, because then we have what I always say, this is the last nectar flow is around end of October. That's when your hives are really strong and they rob out your neighbor's hives, and then they steal all the honey and mites from that hive and they bring it back to your hive. So we see this, we treat, our mite count goes down, and then October, November, it starts screaming back up again. Because the main thing is that right now you want super healthy bees, because these bees are growing your winter bees. And then you want your winter bees to be so healthy, or perfectly healthy, so that they can last all the way through to, March, April. So, mites under control. And then after that, the formula basically is you want 100% of all of your comb in your hive to be drawn. Okay? So if you have a box that is, the bottom is fully drawn, the top is not, then you have to make a decision of taking that top off and concentrating them on the bottom. Whatever you want your boxes to be full. Or if you have, boxes that are in extra, you can give some of those frames to a weaker hive that has frames. Or you might have 2 hives, a weak hive and a strong hive. You may just pinch the queen in the weak hive and then take those resources and give it to the good hive. 2 weak hives will not make it through the winter. 1 strong one will. And then come spring, hopefully your hive is still alive. You split it, and you're back to 2 again. Just remember, two weak ones will not make 1 strong. Or 2 weak ones can make 1 strong. But just, that's the hardest part for beekeepers right now. And that's probably what we'll be doing today, is see what we're missing. And if we're missing something, we just take 1 hive at a time and we start robbing resources from it. And then once that one is totally depleted, we go to the next one. And then say if we have 4 hives that are somewhat robbed, and then we can say, well, let's combine them, and we have now 1 strong hive. So we want all the, whatever, I don't care what the count is going in, I don't care what the count is coming out, but I want all the hives to be strong. So I'm going to look for, my optimum is going to be two deeps, is going to be my optimum. Maximum will be 2 deeps and a medium. But I will also take a deep and a medium, and then from there we may end up with a deep. Okay, but so then the ratio is 100% drawn comb. So even if it's a deep, it's going to be 100% drawn comb. 50% of it's going to be honey. 25%. It's going to be 25%. It's going to be brood. 25% is going to be pollen. That's what we're looking for. So once we do that, then we can kind of look at a hive and say, okay, this hive's light on pollen, this hive's light on honey. So for you, your home hive, what I did when I first started out and I had just a few hives, I made a sheet and I took an inventory of every single frame front and back. And it was really kind of easy. What you just go, if you have help, it's really simple. You just pick up a frame, you go, honey, honey, put it back in. You go to next time, honey, pollen, put it back in. And you mark on a sheet, just go through your hives just real fast. Check every single frame. And you might say 0.5 this and 0.5 that. And then you go back inside, you sit down with your notebook and you start studying it all. And then what I was doing is I was drawing a diagram and I would say, okay, this hive needs this. And then now I have a recipe and I go out to the apiary and I go to this hive, I take this, this, and this, and I dip, then I was able to work really, really quick and really fast. And then I knew exactly what I was going after. Here it's going to be a whole lot more confusing, and then now I just have experience. And my biggest thing is, do as I say, not as I do. As I do, how they say that. So now I go up to the hive and I just lift it. Okay, I know all my frames are drawn. That's just, I know that. I know by a fact all of my hives are fully drawn. And I see pollen coming in like mad, but I'm also going to assume that they need more. Pollen's good, so I'm going to throw a pollen patty on every single hive. Why not, right? And then, when I pop the lid and I see bees boiling at the top, I'm good. I do it that fast. But when you're doing it on your own home hive, maybe you don't have a lot of experience on it. So I like to do the whole math, and you learn a lot about what's in the hive. So yeah,
Question for you.
Yeah.
So I've only got one hive, so it's really tough to, manipulate resources.
Yes, that's the problem with having one hive.
Mm-hmm.
You should always have at least 2 hives.
Yeah. That's a whole different story. We didn't even plan to have a hive, so.
Yeah.
But I have a situation where I know that my second deep, because I lost the queen early on, or maybe June time frame.
Yep.
Anyways, they built that 100%, that my second deep is 100% honey.
Perfect.
So I am obviously over the 50% with
Perfect.
the honey. Is that okay?
That's absolutely perfect.
Okay.
That's ideal. Really, if you have a double deep,
Mm-hmm.
ideally you really want that top box to be nothing but honey.
It is. All capped.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
They got enough room with just 2 boxes?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I feel guilty. You get all these, and
Yeah.
try to squeeze them all
Yeah,
down.
you start
into 2
squeezing them
boxes.
down. And this is a time of year where, like I'm moving a lot of hives right now because I'm selling a lot of hives, and I could care less if I leave foragers behind. Because I want my population to go down. But the problem is I'm taking a hive away, and then the hives remaining get even stronger. But they say like now is a good time to actually start making splits, and you have these hives that are really, really strong. You need to split them because you have so many bees, they can eat you out of house and home. But I've also been noticing the hives I've been going through, haven't been going through a lot with all this heat, but I've been moving some bees around and doing some stuff that the brood rearing has really dropped. Really dropped. So not sure if that's all because of my formic treatments or if it's the heat or the fall, but she's really on a downward spiral here of laying. So don't be surprised you go in there. You may not see as many eggs as you're used to. You may not see as much brood as you're used to, but you want to see lots of pollen and you want to see lots of honey. That's what you want. So basically, what you want to do is, I come up to hives and you just kind of lift them. If they're not heavy, it's time to feed, and you want to feed. You want to give them 2 to 1 right now. So we're switching to 2 to 1, and you want them to bulk it up. And remember, we're in a dearth, so they're going to be also consuming some of it right now. But the idea is that between now and September 15th, you want to be up to that magic number, which varies by area. But here it seems like it's around 70 pounds that you want your hive to be. Like over in Spokane, they're like 100 plus, but their winters are different. Okay, and then once you get all that, so by September 15th, generally that's when our rains start, and that's when, let's see if I'm supposed to. By September 15th, the rain starts, and our temperatures really start cooling off. So it's going to be harder and harder and harder for them to actually draw the moisture out of that sugar water, and then you might go into the cooler part of the year with uncapped nectar, and then that adds even more moisture into the hive.
So you're saying 2 sugars to 1 cup of water?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep. So I highly recommend that people buy you get a drill with a paint mixer paddle on it, because especially for you, for getting so many hives, I do not heat my water. I don't have time to heat water. And what I do is I just take, and I don't measure. Some people measure it very, very accurately. I do it by eyeball, but it's, 2 parts sugar, 1 part water, and use that drill and just sit there for a couple minutes, and it mixes it really well. So I like to mix it, and then I go do something else, and then I come back and maybe mix it one more time. But I never heat it, and also put a little good dash of apple cider vinegar in it. Now keep it from molding. So feed your bees, and it's a fine line of, I told them last time, I said, dump it down their throats, kind of literally, just give them as much as they'll take. But also, don't go too crazy with it, because you don't want them to backfill a brood nest, but generally they won't do too much of that this time of year. And it's going to be kind of a good thing. Just remember, your brood nest is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. But yeah, so give them, so get all that done, and then from there, then be prepared to put your sugar boxes, quilt boards, moisture boards, and all that on, which is a whole nother topic of, what you do after that fact. And I can show you sugar boxes.
Did you do that last weekend? Did you talk about that?
We did.
Okay. And what time? So we're doing all this stuff in September. When do the boxes go on, and when do we
So
stop?
I personally like to put sugar boxes. I like to put my sugar boxes on early, because I want them to build a bridge between the top of the comb.
Sure.
So after September 15th, I don't go into my bottom boxes at all.
Okay.
I'm done. September 15th, I don't hardly get stung anymore after September 15th, because I'm never going into a box. So I put my sugar board up on top, and I let them build a propolis bridge, a comb bridge of burr comb up to the screen, so that when it gets really, really cold, they can be able to move up that bridge. I've seen some of these. I've got some sugar boxes that I've made, and there's like too much of a gap, and it's hard for them to cross that if they're kind of getting lethargic. So and you'll see they'll build up comb. Sometimes they'll build it up that high inside the sugar box, and when I go to add my cakes, I'll just scrape off the top, but I'll leave that bridge below. And then I'll also, at about this time of year, I'm making my sugar cakes. So I make my sugar cakes out of, my recipe is I put 10 pounds of sugar into a bowl, in like a mixing bowl, and I take about a cup of water with a dash of apple cider vinegar in it, and then I pour it in slowly. I don't know if it's exactly a cup, but I have a container that's got just a little bit of water, and I pour it in just enough so that when I'm kneading it by hand, I can form a snowball. Okay, and because I want to make like a cake, and then I will use a mold of some sort. Some people will, down here we do it a different way. We actually mold it into the sugar board, and then we have a piece of 2x4 we put in the middle, and after it dries, you take that 2x4 out, and I've got a tunnel now that come up through that cavity that when you have to remove the 2x4. But for me, I make them into egg cartons. So I take an egg carton and I split it. So I got the top and the bottom, and I make like a loaf of bread out of it. I pack as much as I can, it looks like a loaf, into a egg carton, and then I let them set out and they dry. But you can use anything you can dream up that can be a mold, and just make sure they can come out. So if it's something that you think is tight, put wax paper or something in it. I've used those aluminum baking things. You know, if you're gonna put like a turkey in or something. I've made them out of that, and then I just make them all up and I let them dry. It takes weeks, sometimes weeks for them to dry. So then I let them dry, and then you know, usually December, January, I go up there, take my quilt box up, and I just slide in whatever they need. You know, so I will put them in there. So I usually my way I did it last year is I put 2 loaves, basically, of those egg carton things in each hive. Okay, and then just watch it. You'll notice that they probably won't touch it for a while, but this is emergency food. Just think about that. So usually January they don't touch it. February you're gonna start seeing them touching it, and then all of a sudden, you know, late February, March, they're gonna be all over it. So you need to keep an eye on it, because that usually when bees need it and they starve is not till like February, March, April. That's when they're really increasing the brood quantity. The nest needs to get the temperature hotter, so they're burning more energy, and also it's getting warmer out and they're flying more. They're consuming more energy. So usually your hurdle is to get through winter. You know, if your bees die by New Year's, then you probably had mites. And if they die by spring, early spring, they've starved to death. So I'm always going out to my hives and I lift the back. If it feels light, I pop the top, I look in there and make sure they've got food. So you can have all that stuff ready. Another way to do it, and the way I've been doing it, and it's kind of super simple. Normally when you put the quilt box or the sugar box off, you take your inner cover out and put it in the shed. Okay. Another way of doing is leave your inner cover on and put your sugar box on top, and then your quilt box, and then just let it sit. And then come around the first of the year, come back with 10 pounds of sugar, or how much ever you can get in there, and pour it mist the bottom of it. Take a mister and just put a light mist of water on the inner cover, and then just pour your sugar all the way around, as much as you can without letting it go down in the hole. So you're gonna probably pour a good 5 or 8 pounds in the top of a hive, okay? And it's just gonna sit on top of that inner cover, and then I give a little bit of mist more, and then I shut it up. And that will actually act as a moisture. It'll absorb moisture, and then the bees will come up and they'll consume it. And then you just check, pour a little bit more in if it needs to. And then if come springtime, if they haven't consumed it all, you just scrape it into a 5-gallon bucket and dissolve it. Now you've got your 1-to-1 for spring. You know,
So do they prefer either one? I mean, if you have a sugar
I did 50-50 last year, and I'm going to probably do 100% that way this year. It was so simple. I didn't have to make.
Do a sugar box or?
I did, yeah. So your sugar box now basically doesn't have any vent holes in it. It's just a box, and it sits right on top of the inner cover. Yeah, it's real simple. It's real easy.
Do you use the super for that then? For the loose sugar?
I mean, I'll show you. Well, here, I think I got it. So this is a quilt box. So if this was my sugar one, this screen is quarter or a half-inch mesh, so the bees can come through it.
Oh.
So if you're doing a one with the hard candy, you know, with the loaves, then it's that half-inch wire cloth, and then they'll just sit on top of here. If you do it the way with the inner cover, and you're just going to pour sugar in, all it needs to be is a box. And I make these out of scrap lumber, and it just needs to be a box, a shim, okay, no vent holes, and you have your inner cover. You set this on, and then you have your quilt box on top if you want, and you just pour your sugar in around the hole of your inner cover. And then, so some people will do this and not even do a quilt box, but I also almost always use a moisture board as well. So if I have my sugar box then my quilt box, then I lay this on top, and that's just one extra added insulation and moisture absorber. So all year long, I'm always looking at the bottom of this, and on the bottom of this, you'll see all kinds of moisture. I always have 2 of these for every hive. So I put one on, and just check it periodically. Eventually, you're gonna come and go, wow, that's pretty damp. Take it someplace where it can get dry, and you put the dry one on, and you just swap them back and forth. Last year was the first year I ever had to do that. Most years, I'm satisfied with that. It's doing its job. You see water drops, but it's not damp. I mean, it's not like, wow, that's wet. It's good. But last year, for some reason, I had a lot of damp ones, and I was changing them out. I have them spread out all over the garage trying to get them to dry. But it's, each season is a little bit different.
And your quilt box is full of chips?
Yep. So what I'll do is I'll put a sheet of burlap down. Try to get that burlap that's really absorbent. There's some of it's kind of like waxy, but put down a good one. I like a real wide weave, and then I pour my chips on here. You could put the chips straight in here if you wanted to, but just kind of keeps the debris from coming down through the hive as much. But then you just fill it with chips, and then make sure on your quilt boxes that you're pulling it away from these vent holes, so that their air can get in there and do its thing. So, and you'll notice that when you come into your box, you'll notice that the chips generally on top are going to be kind of damp, but if you dig in, they're wet, or they're dry underneath. So sometimes I'll just kind of fluff it, but I've never ever changed my quilt box out because it was wet. So I've never.
And does the inner cover go on top of the blanket thing? Or?
Yeah, you can. So some like Dave, he doesn't want to take all of his inner covers and put them back in the shed. So what he'll do is he'll put, so you have sugar box, quilt box, moisture board, and then he'll just put his inner cover up on top so it stays with the hive. So in the spring, right where his inner covers are at, which is a good method, and adds a little insulation as well. So.
Can I ask one more question about the feeding? So
Yeah.
we were talking about ramping up, right? So we're in September 15th. You're supposed to basically have all your frames rearranged, and you've got 2
Well, you really want to have all your frames arranged and know where you're at by August 15th.
Oh, by August 15th.
So now you have a month to take action.
Okay.
You have a month to make sure your mites are fully under control. You have a month to make sure they have enough pound. You have a
Right.
month to make sure they have enough sugar.
Right.
So by September 15th, that's your end game date.
So we're gonna stop, but we're doing 2-to-1 right now. We're gonna stop feeding, but we're not gonna put the sugar things in until later. Is
Yes,
that what you're saying?
the
So that
sugar, the emergency feed doesn't have to go in until much
right,
later.
So the sugar box is there, but nothing's in it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Now, it doesn't mean you can't put it in there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no hard and
So
fast rule.
if I've got 2 new colonies
Yeah.
this year, could I keep? And I've been feeding
Yeah.
them like.
So what
constantly.
I have found, if I put the sugar in too early, the bees will recognize it as trash, and they'll haul it out the front door.
Okay.
So that's why I like to wait a little bit, and they're a little bit more like, hey, that could be something interesting for us for later. But if you put it on there right now, you'll probably have a nice pile of of sugar right out the front door.
Can I ask one more question too? And I don't know if anyone else with new hives has this, but so one of my hives, I've got 2 deeps. They're almost all drawn. But we can ask that later. But I did put a super on to give them some more room, and that's mostly drawn out with honey.
Yep.
What do I do with it? Because I'm not going to take it, right? Because it's my first
Yeah.
year. So what do I do with that? Do I take it now? Do I take it away?
Yeah, you could to get to your numbers. So now if the super, if it's half drawn or half, is it drawn, all drawn,
It's
or
almost all, maybe 80% drawn.
you can do. Is it got any honey in it?
It does.
It's full of honey.
I'd have to go back and check exactly, but I would say it's probably maybe, let's say 75% honey, 85% drawn. It's not
Okay.
totally full.
Yeah, what you could do is then there's the other. Well, if you could get a hold of extra frames, and I may I'm kind of questionable, but I may be selling just frames to people,
Oh.
fully drawn. Might include could be because I'm selling a bunch of hives, and then I came up with this idea that, well, maybe I'll sell pieces of the hives,
Yeah.
and for people like yourself
Yeah,
that you might
definitely.
need 2 frames
Right.
of, and you tell
Yes.
me I want 2 frames of brood, 2 frames of
Sign
nectar.
me up, yes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna wait and see how this goes. I'll probably know in the next couple days. But say you don't have that option available,
Right.
you can do, and I hate to do this, but you can do it, is use follower boards.
Okay.
And a follower board is nothing but a piece of wood that replaces the frame. So if you have a 10 frame box, let's make it an 8 frame box. Some people will take a frame feeder and put it down in there. And you can fill that frame feeder with sugar.
Just
Dry sugar, just fill it up. And now it becomes, so what you're doing is you're reducing the amount of space of the hive.
Sure.
There's, some people will say that, the size of the hive really doesn't matter. It's the size of the cluster, because it's the outside of the cluster is at a certain temperature, and then it gets warmer as you go in. But you also don't want to have them, this cluster inside of this big empty box. But if you can reduce the space somehow, Stedman sells follower boards, but all it is a piece of plywood. It could be a 2x6, and you cut it out the shape of a frame, so it fits in there and takes up space. So you just take out the 2 undrawn frames and you drop one of these in there. Now you can't cheat this. This is a last ditch kind of a method, but it works. But you don't want to, if you don't want to have 5 frames in there, and you have 5 frames worth of filler boards. And you could do the same thing on the honey. So what I would do is I would center everything. So I'd put a follower board here and a follower board there. Now you just increase the insulation of the hive, because I'd make it tight so it really, sits tight in there. And do the same thing with the super. Just push everybody towards the center. So if you have deep frames, and then I had a box of honey, I would push it to the center and leave it on the top.
Okay, so I should leave the
Yeah.
super, though I should leave for food.
Yeah, it would probably be okay. Or you could take it off, and
I just wasn't sure.
you could take it off, and then you can take those frames and put it in the freezer, and you could keep it for spring, or that early spring. And then, because once you come into that hive, if you get a warm enough day, you'll come in the hive and you're going to see that a lot of the frames are just empty because there's nothing on it.
Sure.
You can take that frame out and you can drop that medium frame into a deep slot. They will draw a comb across the bottom of it, but you could put that in there and they will use that as food. I mean,
what's better? Is it better to pack them down into 2 deeps and add the dry sugar as well? I mean, I would do it anyway, or leave the super on there with the dry sugar.
You may end up doing both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah. So I would always
And
be
then from an
prepared.
energy
Always be
standpoint, if I
prepared
have
for
to
the.
crawl through the super to get to the dry.
Yeah.
stuff
If you're gonna
and
do
then-
the sugar cake, you could, or the they call it mountain camp method,
Okay.
where you leave the inner cover and then you have the shim. You can leave that off, but just be prepared. Have your shim ready, so that if you come, it's late February and you come to the hive and they've consumed all that honey because we've had a warm winter, then you could quickly put the shim on. You're not going inside the hive. Just take the lid off, put the shim on, pour your sugar on, put the lid back on. Now they have emergency feed. So you could do that, but I would have a quilt box on it
For sure.
for sure.
Okay.
The rule is you don't want to inspect your hive below 60, but you can go into your hive much colder. Just do things kind of quick. Just don't go in there and start pulling frames out and taking pictures and looking at it. You can go in, I'll go in there and all the time I just go in and I go, yep, they're good, and I close it back up again. That's all I do all winter long. I'm just peeking in the top. Just remember, there's nothing you can do once you go in the box. What if the queen's gone? What are you gonna do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. So, only thing you can do is really treat with oxalic acid vapor. That's the only thing that you can do for your bees once you get to that, October, November, December. So, that's all you can do. So don't go in there. There's no need to go in there.
What is a
stop
shim?
treating with oxalic acid?
As long as when I treat with oxalic acid and I pull out my sticky board, if I have either 0 or just a few, very, very few mites, like below 10, then I will wait and I'll treat again the next month. So you want to treat when the bees are actively flying. Okay, so during the winter, my target date that I know I'm always treating at is December 21st. Okay, that's like what I call my last treatment date. So once I get close to December 21st, that's the winter solstice. I know that theoretically I should be broodless. What I mean by theoretically is depending on how warm, and if we have a warm winter, there are still going to be brood in there. But if we have a really cold winter, we may not have any brood in there, and then my oxalic acid works really well. So around December 21st, I start looking at the weather. You know, because generally for the Pacific Northwest, we always have a warm day in there. It may not happen until January 10th, but you know, I'm watching that I'm watching that range. If once the weather is right, I hit them that one more time, and then I come out 3 days later, and I pull my sticky board out if I've got one, and I check it. And if I have a lot of mites, then I'm treating again 5 days and 5 days, and I'm just going to keep it up until I have almost no mites fall. So, you know, a lot of people say you shouldn't treat unless you need to, but during the winter, how do you really know? You know, so with oxalic acid, a lot of studies say that it really doesn't harm the bees. You know, I guess if you did it every day, it would be not good. But doing a shot in October, checking your sticky boards, doing a shot in November, check your sticky board, doing a shot in December, check your sticky board, and then I'm done. So I have not treated with oxalic acid since last December.
What do you use for sticky boards? Those things are expensive.
Political boards, political signs.
Huh?
Political signs.
And do you smear something on it?
I don't.
Yeah.
Some people will take like Pam or something like that, just to spray a little bit on it so they're a little stickier,
Yeah.
so that when the mites fall on it. So I don't see that much of a difference between putting something on and not putting something on. And I don't count every single mite. You know, I know some of the guys will put grids on there and they'll say, I've got 333 mites. Okay, I pull mine out and I go, holy crap, I got a lot of mites. And I clean it off, put it back in, and I start my treatment regimen until I know, you know. Now when I get down to them, I'll say, well, okay, I got 10 or I've got 5, but that's easy. But if I get more than, say 20, I'm in holy crap mode and I'm going.
So you're leaving for the winterizing though, you're leaving the screen bottom board on your hives? Or?
Yeah, so the screen bottom board's there,
Yeah.
and then I've got my political sign or
Right.
whatever on top of that, and that's how it stays.
So that stays there all winter?
All winter.
That's what's blocking the...
Yeah.
Okay.
However you go into winter, that's how you stay into winter. If you have your entrance reducer open that much, which that's how I have mine on that bigger opening, so I reduce all my, whatever it is, that's where it stays till spring. If my political sign is in, that's where it stays till spring. If I forgot, it stays out. Because however the bees go into winter, they will set up the hive and they will propolize holes. Oh, I also have an upper entrance, so the airflow and the moisture and everything else. Now I do have some bees that will I'd say almost half of my hives last year propolize that whole shut. They did it, they can keep it that way. So whatever they do, that's their business. So I don't go in there and say, I know better, I'm a beekeeper. I make sure that they do it the way they want to do it. So, yep, so upper entrance is good. It's not 100%, but upper entrances are good. Just remember, we're not Minnesota. So, no, don't be wrapping your hives with insulation. Don't go crazy because, we get a few days where we might get into the 30s, low, maybe upper 20s, and cold is good. If you do a lot of homework about winterizing bees, a lot of the commercial guys will actually take their bees and put them into cold storage. And they bring the temperature down or they bring the temperature up so that the bees are in a state where they're using the optimum amount of energy. You don't want them to be too active or too cold. So A lot of us follow Ian Stepler, who's up in Canada. He actually brings his bees in, and they're in single deeps. He brings them in and puts them in a room. He brings his temperature up because now they don't have to. They know what the exact moisture and the exact temperature the bees need to be, and they will keep them in that right temperature range, and they'll winterize just fine. They do this in South Dakota. WSU is doing a big study where they're going to be bringing containers, refrigerated containers out to apiaries, and the guys are going to move all your bees into this container, and they're going to refrigerate them.
Wow.
And they're going to put them at that perfect temperature, and they're going to use the minimal amount of feed. So a lot of people say, but what do the commercial guys do? So the commercial guys do that, but then they also generally, once the weather starts getting warm in California, they're loading their bees up and they're going south. So they don't have to worry too much about moisture and emergency feed because they're taking them south. They're following the nectar. Because they start moving their bees in like February out of here, and they're taking them farther south, and they're wanting those colonies to build up. So by the time the almonds come along, they've got double deep, really, really strong colonies because they get paid by the strength of the colony. So they want to have they're pumping them up really, really early. So, okay.
So going back, what is a shim when you're talking about?
A shim could be anything from, it's just a small gap. So I have some shims that are 3/4 of an inch, and I have some shims that are this big, depending on what my purpose is. So I use shims for, like, say if I'm wanting to keep queens, like if I want to bank queens. So I put a queen excluder, a shim, then I can lay all my queens up there in their cages, so the queen below can't come up and mess with the queens in the cage. So it's a little small shim. You can use, a shim as for all kinds of reasons. There's different ways to do shims, but most of the time, like in here, it would be a sugar shim. So it's going to be, it's not exact,
Yeah.
but it's about half the size of a medium box.
Okay.
So a lot of people will come and they'll find. I don't know if you saw the post on Facebook. I had all the boxes over here. I think you guys got some, didn't you? The old boxes, or somebody did. And you basically find an old box, cut it in half, and now you've got 2 shims. Or if it's a deep, cut it 3 ways. Just gotta watch for the nails on your table saw.
Yeah.
And we made, and you'll see some of our shims are made out of old boxes. We have old boxes, that are just not that great. We'll cut them down and then, keep using them, recycling them. So, let's see. Trying to think what else. Any other questions?
Do you have any hives that are set up like that yet, with the shim and the?
No, but we could do one. But
I just was curious because I kind of had the same thought about asking with the shim, because you mentioned the shim and then the top, and then putting the, what did you call it, with the pouring the sugar?
Mountain camp.
Mountain camp. I was curious about.
we'll just come here. We still have it set up from last week.